Well, welcome everyone back to our Common Sense Summit today. You're gonna have your mind blown today. We have Dr. Lee Merritt. Most of you, many of you probably have heard of Dr. Lee Merritt. She was involved with the Frontline Doctor group right at the beginning of when COVID hit, and been involved ever since. And she's learned a lot about a lot of things since then that we're going to share with you today, medical, political, and very deep dive in both of those areas. And we're also going to talk about the restored republic as well today. So let's welcome Dr. Lee Merritt, and very, very, very happy to have you here, Lee.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks very much. I'm really excited about the restored republic, as we all should be. I think
Yes.
we have to go there, or we'll never get out of the mess that we're in. Especially even in science. People don't think science can be perverted, but it can be
Well,
by government.
I've been very excited for a long time. I've been involved since 2009. I was a U.S. Senator. I think we had 600 people voting in Florida. So in 2009. And so I've been involved. I went around the country with a PowerPoint, very similar to the PowerPoint that Colonel Sandy Mayarecki is using. And she's amazing. And I think that she has really lit a fire
Yeah,
for the Restored Republic. And I recommend highly that people check out her videos on Rumble, especially the last one that she did with SG Anon about a week ago. It's the SG Anon 136 file, and it's the second interview he did with Dr. Myrecki, and it is awesome, just totally
yeah,
awesome. So I was going to ask her to be on this summit, but she's so busy,
yeah.
and SG Anon has done such a great job of interviewing her. I'm just recommending that people go to Rumble, go to SG Anon videos, and listen to his interviews with Dr. Myrecki. Do you know Sandy? Have you met her yet?
Yeah, actually, we've been talking about her coming on. I was going to interview her too. We've been talking the last week. So
Good. Yeah.
yeah, I met somebody else that I said, why don't you come on and talk about the restored republic? And they said, oh, you need, Sandy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. She's very busy, but yeah, I'm
yeah,
sure
I
she'll come
know.
on your show. So that would be great. Okay, well let's start where we just were when I saw you with Mike Adams last night talking about viruses, and at first I thought maybe I didn't hear it right, but then I thought about it and I thought, well, I think that's what they really said. Viruses don't exist. So let's
Yeah.
start there and talk about that issue.
Right. And just for background, I mean, I'm an orthopedic spine surgeon. That's what I did for my career. And this isn't I think one of the reasons that I noticed that surgeons are overrepresented in
Mhm.
the new medicine breaking out of the old paradigms is that we just don't have any ego involved in this. We didn't give vaccines. We didn't deal with cancer much. We were referral people. So it's kind of an interesting world out there now is that we're kind of leading the charge in some ways. But the problem here is that we've accepted a lot of things. It's not just about viruses. It's about the nature of cancer. It's about parasites. It's about, uh, uh, you know, really the nature of our world in many ways. And we've accepted it without proof.
Mhm.
Now that's what's amazing. You see, we as physicians and I'll put the PhDs in this realm too, is that unfortunately when things got very technical in medicine, for example, I remember somebody saying to me that they stopped taking the New England Journal of Medicine when all the names of the articles started with numbers. And that's because it was all down at this molecular genetic level. And so nobody was reading the stuff anymore. They couldn't work their way through all this complexification of the issue, which might not be by accident. But the point here is that we skimmed over the technique. We would read the abstract of the paper. When you're reading a scientific paper, there's an abstract that's supposed to summarize the paper, and
Right.
then there's maybe how you choose the patients. You might if it's a personal study, you might have that section, how you did. But then there's the technical part. The technique. How did we actually do this
Mhm.
research? And that's where your eyes glazed over and you just skip to the ending of the punchline. What's the conclusion? But the meat is in the technique. And so I first heard this, like you, when I first heard this, it was first from Thomas Cowan and Andy Kaufman. And I first heard this and I just couldn't wrap my head around this. I knew that COVID was a scam. I said COVID from the get-go. I said COVID's a bioweapon. It's not a real natural occurring disease. Whatever this is, it's not naturally occurring. And I think it's probably poisons in our environment somehow, but I can't prove that. Well, so I've been skeptical of a lot of things, but that one, it just went right over my, horizon. I just couldn't quite wrap my head around that because we've been told this for so many, I mean, for our whole lives. But one time I listened to Andy at Buttar's conference one year, and I went up to him afterwards. I said, "Okay, Andy, you got me. I'm convinced by what you just showed me. But what's chicken pox? What's these things? How do we reconcile all this?" And that's what I spent 2 years of my life looking at. And when I realized that that was a fraud, and I realized that they're right, that there's no proof of the existence of viruses as people think of them. But I realized that that is if it took me 2 years to come to that conclusion, reading, and I can read the hard science, I said, how do you present this to the average guy on the street that thinks you're just a Looney Tune because you're not saying what everybody in the universities is saying? Well, and so I determined that there are really two ways. One is to by kind of parable, and the other one is by looking at the history of how the scam was done. Okay, because the second thing I came to the conclusion was that this is not a mistake. It's not a random mistake in this whole thing. It's a planned program.
Mhm.
And it started way back with Edward Jenner. In fact, it started probably even before that, but it started with Edward Jenner in the late 1700s and the thing about smallpox. And so here's one of those, and this is not a parable, this is just a narrative story about the kind of thing we've been hornswoggled about. And it gets to vaccines. It appears that they've wanted to give us vaccines for a very long time. And they started with Edward Jenner. Edward Jenner, the father of the so-called the cowpox and the smallpox vaccine. First of all, they call him Dr. Edward Jenner, but he wasn't a doctor. He bought his license. He convinced the government to give him a license, which right now he's in with bed with the government, and they actually funded his research. The second point is that he claimed that he discovered that milkmaids had these during a smallpox outbreak. He discovered that milkmaids had these pustules on their hands, but they never got sick with smallpox, that could kill you. They just got a little bit of this stuff on their hands, and he theorized that they were getting something that was like smallpox, but it was cowpox. And cows at the time had these pustular things on their udders, and that if we just take some of this and we scrape it into the arms of children and other people, that we can then help them not die of smallpox. That was what he told everybody, and that's what they did. Well, the truth of the matter is he didn't even come up, it was farmers that came up with this observation of the milkmaids. And here's the problem that puts the whole thing to a lie. First of all, if you look at the actual numbers of people inoculated with the smallpox vaccine over, for 100 years after that or more, into the 1940s, more people died of smallpox that had the vaccine than not. So that's not the answer here. But the second thing is, the bad news is cows don't get cowpox. This is an obvious one that we should have figured out, but nobody looked at it. This is the kind of thing Albert St.
Amazing.
George. Yeah, Albert
Amazing.
St. George once said that
Yeah.
that science is all about seeing what everyone else is seeing and thinking what no one else has thought. Well, here we have this story, but nobody ever went back and actually looked at the details. And the details are that steers don't get cowpox, bulls don't get cowpox, and young heifers don't get cowpox. Meaning the only cows that were getting cowpox were the ones being milked by the dirty hands of the milkmaids. It was going the other direction. And when I just said, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable, I went to
Oh,
the,
so let me just make sure that I understand. So something that was on the hands of of these
yeah, yeah, in
were
other words,
infecting the cows.
right, or something. At least whatever it was not, if it were cowpox, why don't all cows get it?
Right.
All these only one very small segment of cows get it, those being milked by the milkmaids.
Okay.
And so I went to the veterinary literature to see if they have understood this scam. And yes, they call it now, they don't call it cowpox, they call it pseudo cowpox, meaning fake cowpox,
Wow.
which is kind of interesting. But anyway, to go on, the point is that that I went out and I decided to look at the personalization of this. And one of the things I found early on was uh, the guy who was the father, theoretically, of viral culture, the guy who got the Nobel laureate for this, John Franklin Enders, John F. Enders. I tried to figure out what his PhD was in because they kept saying he had a PhD, but nobody told me what it was in, which is a little unusual.
Mhm.
But I finally, at the Nobel laureate site, I discovered that he had a PhD in in bacteriology and immunology from Harvard in 1930. But there's something wrong with that because the immunology, when I was in medical school in Rochester, New York, my friend was a MD, PhD student. He was immunology, and that was a brand new specialty. First PhD was given in like 1976, the year he was
So
studying it.
how did
So,
somebody get one in
right.
19?
So how did somebody get one and I have the Harvard points that they say they started the immunology PhD was granted. This is one of those academic big deals that they do. You have to have a committee. You have to determine that this is a real specialty, and you have to do whatever academics to do to determine that we can now grant this PhD. And so they did that in 1974 in Harvard. So here we are 40 years before, and he's got one. Second thing, then I went back and looked at his history, and it said, and he was not an average guy. He was a very wealthy scion of a big, East Coast big money family. And
Mhm.
he inherited $19 million and went and took that to go to Yale in 1916, where he was a member of the Scroll and Key Society. Now, you and I know about the uh,
Skull and Bones.
the Skull and Bones Society, but that's apparently for the lesser lights like John Kerry and George Bush. The real big money guys are Scroll and Key, and he was one of those. And then it said, this is when I really woke up. He left he left Yale in 2 years. He left in 1917 to go fight the war, fight World War I. He as a pilot in the Air Force with the rank of ensign. And anybody out there in the military is going, what? Because there was no Air Force in 1918, and
No.
there's no ensign in Air Force ever. I know I was an ensign in the Navy. That's a Navy rank. So
Yeah.
there's something all wrong about that. It's just too many
Mhm.
things. And then he went out, he literally came back and graduated in 1922. And he didn't graduate with a science degree, as far as I know. He was studying like literature. He gets out and sells real estate, and then suddenly pops up in Harvard, and he's done this research and gets a PhD in immunology and bacteriology. So it's a pretty unbelievable. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but it's a pretty
Yeah.
not clean record.
Questionable.
You'd
Questionable.
question that record. And then when you look at what he did, it turns out, for example, they worked with polio. And all of the papers that are about this, and I'm going to tell you, you'll find this whenever you start really looking deep at things. It's hard to get to the key papers. All of the papers that led up to his discovery and then his papers are all behind paywalls. So the average person like me can't afford to buy all these papers to look at them and read them. If you're a professor at Harvard, you can probably get at them, but not me. And so a lot of this is hidden. But the good news is he got the Nobel Peace Prize, so he had to give a speech, and he used the paper that he did this, and it showed how he did this work. And essentially, he said that one day he's in his lab and they decide to look at the poliomyelitis virus. Well, they call it a virus, but think about it. This is in the 1930s and 1940s. How did they know what a virus was? We didn't have electron microscopy. This can't be seen by light microscopy. We didn't know he was the guy that invented the culture method theoretically, so we didn't culture it. There was no test for it. Um, so it turns out, what did he start with? He started with what they called Lansing poliomyelitis solution. But what it really was slurified brain of a dead polio victim from Lansing, Michigan. And in 1918, this kid died, this teenager died of polio. A neurosurgeon took out the brain and spinal cord, made it into this solution, and then started experimenting on mice. And he injected it into the brains of rats. And what they found was when they injected this, they injected it in the first rat, nothing happened. So they took that rat's brain, slurified it, put it in a blender or something, and then put it in the next rat. Nothing happened. They had to do 15 passes until the rat became paralyzed. And then they said, whoa, we got polio. Does that make any sense in the real world? And here's the point I'm making. It would only be possible it was the eastern cotton rat was the only animal they could get this to work in. And they could not get it to spread into the nose. If they tried to put this swab in the nose, they could not make the person get or the mouse get polio. But what are they telling us? They're telling us these wild viruses come in through the air and somehow, like flying unicorns, I breathe it out, it gets into your nose, and you get sick with a virus. But that's what there is absolutely, even if people want to believe there's something called a
No,
virus out
no
there,
proof for that at
there's
all.
no proof of airborne transmission. And this is a great study to actually disprove it in the fact that they actually tried to produce the disease by putting it in the mice. They also did it in monkeys. They could not, again, they had to make multiple passes through the brains of monkeys. The only way they could spread polio was by intracranial injection. Is that a virus? Of course not. That's not what they're telling us. So at
So,
every turn,
okay.
when you look at this, you can't find proof of viruses.
So where
It's
where do the socks come into this? Peter and Jonas Salk and with
well,
this?
again, they're not proving viruses. They're just creating vaccines,
Hmm.
right? So
Right.
again, it's easy to create a toxic slurry of something and call it a vaccine, but what are they really creating it to? They're taking, in those days, they were taking what they thought, probably this polio slurry. But again, did it end polio? That's another lie. I recommend that anybody reads The Poison Needle by Eleanor McBean. The other thing I looked at, by the way, was the influenza virus. Again, it's all of this genetic sequencing is done without isolating a virus. They don't isolate a virus. In the COVID, they got fluid, bronchoalveolar lung fluid, out of one guy's lung that
Hmm.
had the symptoms of COVID. They used PCR tests, which the inventor of the PCR test said you can never do it for this. And they dipstick this stuff with these PCR tests, and they then ran it through computer algorithms. There is nothing in the real world that they can use as a gold standard to know that any of that's real.
Amazing.
It's really that bizarre. And so what they're doing is they're creating a narrative. It's like the Truman Show. They're creating a narrative, and we've just believed this narrative because our whole life we've been told the same thing, and it sounds internally consistent. If you're born into a false reality, everything is internally consistent until it isn't. And I'll tell you the time, like at Truman, if you've seen the Truman Show, it's
Oh
not
yeah,
it's not a metaphor, it's a blueprint to
amazing.
what's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
In the Truman Show, he was taught to be afraid of water. That's what kept him in the show.
Right,
And there were lots of things he believed that were just simply, crazy. If he'd gotten off the island and looked around, he would have seen it was all crazy, but it was all internally consistent. But one day, a stage light falls out of the sky and almost hits him. And that's what kind of jogs him and says, if that's the sun, why is there a stage light out
right,
there?
right.
Well, for me, it was the PCR tests. So these PCR tests are, see, this is impossible to have this be true. What I'm just going to tell you, to me, is obvious that this is fakery because the PCR test is 16 or 18 bases long. A base is just these letters that you see, GCTA. Those stand for the bases that are part of the building blocks, let's say, of
Okay,
DNA and
okay.
RNA, right? Now, we have 3.4 billion base pairs in our DNA, in human DNA. An onion has 11 billion base pairs. Why do we have so much more than an onion? The reason is because an onion is self-contained. It doesn't need help being an onion. But we are, as human beings, we are kind of like multinational corporations. We outsource a lot of the human jobs to bacteria. So our gut is made of, our immune system is primarily gut bacteria. Our skin is protected with gut bacteria. We've got bacteria all over us. It turns out that we have more DNA from bacteria in us than we do human DNA. We're like a little human tucked into a big bacterial colony. It's kind of creepy, but that's the way the world is. So to
Wow.
begin with,
Oh,
you've got a huge genetic problem just
mhm.
in even testing us. But the next thing that they did is they only did a short sequence. And this sequence, I finally, in August of 2020, I had learned enough about this and taught myself enough about what was going on to look at the sequences. I found a publication that showed what the 18 tests for COVID were made of. There were 6 tests by the CDC, 6 tests by the Drosten Group, and 6 tests by the Louis Pasteur Institute. So there were 18 slightly different tests, and they all claimed to be that this 16 or 18, I think it's 16 base sequence is so unique. It's only in SARS-CoV-2. It's only in this new virus. And if you test positive for that 16 base sequence, you've got to be exposed or have the disease. That's their point that they made. And on that basis, they locked us down and did all the bad things that they did. So by August of 2020, there had been lots of there'd been lots of genomes of SARS-CoV-2 put up into the gene bank because they admit that viruses vary and that there are different little versions of it. So they kept loading these in. Now, the gene bank is like the encyclopedia of genetic sequences. If you want to know, if you step on something squishy on the ground and then you put some PCR tests in it, theoretically, if their system is right, then you can take those and you can see where it came from, okay?
Hmm.
Or what possibly it came from. Well, if its test, though, for a disease is going to be useful, it has to show you only one answer. It can't be showing you, if that test also is positive for an aardvarks, not just SARS-CoV-2, you can't be using it to test for SARS-CoV-2. It's got to be only that. So there's an index to the gene bank called the BLAST program. It's just a computer sequence program, and you put your little sequence in there and it tells you where it's from. Well, I did that with these 18 tests. Now, if they're real, if they're really testing us to this nasty new virus, it all should have come back SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-2, SARS, 18 of those. None of them came back SARS-CoV-2. They came
Wow.
back Homo sapiens gene 5, Homo sapiens gene 8, Homo sapiens this, Homo sapiens and that. In other words, those came back testing to our genome. They were testing it. This is how evil this was. They were testing us. It wasn't just that they overcycled the tests. Everybody knows about that. It wasn't just that these can't ever be used for diagnosis. This is why it can't be used for diagnosis. But they were also, the sequences were not unique to any virus. They were in our genome that they were testing us for. And the reason that some of them were negative, some of them were positive is just how the tests weren't done correctly. You know,
Yeah.
it's just unbelievable. So when you realize that, then you go back and you look at everything. And here's the other point. So they also were testing us in our nose. Now again, what's in your nose? I mean, what's under your fingernail?
Yeah.
How about the fruit fly that went up your nose? Our nose is a very dirty place.
Right.
And they're also testing a very, very small genetic material when we have not just 3.4 billion bases in our whole body, we have it in every cell in the body and every cell in the nose, plus all that bacterial DNA up there I was telling you about. So this is like taking a teaspoon. So then, this is to take a step back of this testing. Imagine taking a teaspoon of water from the Pacific Ocean, just somewhere at random, one time, and then finding something in there and claiming the whole Pacific Ocean is contaminated.
Yeah.
That's essentially what they did. And not only that, they chose to take that teaspoon from the outflow of the LA County sewer into the
Sewer
Pacific
system.
Ocean.
Yeah.
It's absolutely bizarre. Yeah. And I can't believe that there aren't people that know this. I didn't figure this out I mean, I
So
went this way, but there's got to be people that
you
know.
can't be the only person that knows this.
No, no.
Okay.
The guys on the top running this show know it. The Truman Show controllers know it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so it's just all about money and control.
No, no, it's all about something else. If it were all about money, they wouldn't have had to go to this extreme. They could have done lots of other things. This is not, it's like saying that
Reduction of the population.
yeah, I think it's that, but I think it's, oh, sorry, I have a little cat problem, not a germ problem. There we go. Yeah, I think so. But whatever the motive is, it's not by accident. I think that the history, if you go through this in detail from the beginning of Jenner and through the 19th century and the 20th century, it's interesting that in the 19th century, the doctors then, and these were the university doctors. These were the guys that were on the wrong side of this fight. They were on the right side in the 19th century. When Jenner got people to start, and the British government to start vaccinating people, these guys at the universities were paying attention, and they realized they started seeing three diseases they had not been seeing before. They started to see cancer, they started to see heart disease, and they started to see a lot of weird pulmonary disease. What does that sound like? Exactly what we're seeing today. We're seeing the turbo cancer. This is how I got in the whole parasite thing. Turbo cancer, cancer in the military, like these young guys showing up with multiple Mets at their first presentation. What's going on there? We're seeing, obviously, COVID was a pulmonary problem, but now we're seeing all this other, they want to tell you it was Omicron and all this Delta variants, all that nonsense. They're seeing all this weird pulmonary stuff, and we're seeing uh, uh, cardiac problems.
Right.
You know, the myocarditis, the they just rampant. So sudden death from cardiac stuff. So it's exactly what they saw in 1820, and they tried to stop. The doctors then said, look, some of these cancers that we're seeing are exactly in the area where you did the vaccination. We don't think this is by random. We think these inoculations are causing this all to come out. And they kept screaming this until the end of the 1800s.
Right.
But
And
what
that's
happened
when
then?
that's enters Rockefeller,
Then we captured
Carnegie,
medicine. Yep.
and they captured the whole industry.
And
Right.
I'll tell you the other thing. Here's the other thing I discovered, and this is we're doing a big parasite seminar on Sherry Tenpenny's website on January 25th. I'm putting an ad up today in my Telegram, but you can find it. Look for the parasite, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny parasite protocol or parasite paradigm or something like that. I can't remember the
Right.
name of it, but anyway, and I'm doing the part on parasites and cancer because I discovered, and I went down this road because I said to my friends in the military that I'd met through this COVID fight, I said, the military doctors' friends, I said, they're telling me about these young guys. And I spent 12 years almost in the military. And I I ran sick call for 7,000 Marines in Iwakuni, Japan. So I kind of get a feel for what diseases we saw. And every once in a while, you would see tumors, but it'd be a solitary testicular tumor or something. I mean, they'd send them off to the urologist, they'd take it out, it'd be cured, done, over. This is not what we're seeing now. And these are young, healthy guys with a good immune system they had. And suddenly they're showing up after the vaccination with the first presentation is multiple metastases. Why is that happening? So that got me really thinking about this and talking about this. And I met some people, including a parasitologist, and Brian Artist put me on to him. This guy has been talking about this for years, about parasites cause cancer. So I started going back in the parasitology literature and see what did they know when. And I discovered one of the three theories of cancer at the turn of the century, maybe even a little bit before 1900. They had three theories, and one of them was parasites cause cancer. And a guy in 1927 got the Nobel Peace Prize in medicine and physiology for proving that you could create cancer with parasites. And in the veterinary literature, it's all over the place. They've got 288 parasitic tumors that they know about. And yet, that's their research people are looking.
280, is that what you said?
Yeah, 288 that they have listed, codified. This parasite causes this tumor. This parasite causes this. And yet, when you go to veterinary, like vetmed.com or whatever it is, petmed.com, petmd.com or something to look up something about your animal, what you'll find is they say, well, cancer's genetic, and and they're talking about your pet rat, which was what they experimented. They said pet rats are they're prone to have these cancers. Well, that's what it's rats that was the original work that was done that gave that guy the Nobel Prize. And it's very convincing. They're trying to tell you now, after he got the Nobel Prize, like a decade or so later, they tried to disavow it, saying, well, we were wrong. But you read his research, he was absolutely spot on. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a lot of things about parasitism, but they knew about this for a long time. And I truly believe that cancer is parasites. In a nutshell, I think cancer is parasites. I think there's so much evidence for it.
And
That
so
that
what that involves is a totally different treatment than what they're doing
Well,
now.
it's treatable. The tragedy here is, so this is why, again, speaking to my friends in the military, I said to one of them, I said, so what do you conclude from this sudden change in the behavior of this cancer? Do you really think in 2021 cancer changed its stripes? It's something totally new? Or do you think that there's something going on that could explain this? And then I've already been reading some of this stuff about parasites. So I said to her, I said, let's just think about this. What's different about these guys maybe than the average person on the street? Okay, you got the Marines out in the swamps of North Carolina and the Army and stuff all over the place, and they're snooping and pooping through the brush and swamps, and they're getting infected with parasites. They're eating bad food in third world countries and drinking contaminated water probably, and they're probably got a big dose of parasites in their life. And a lot of them are farm kids that came out of the farm where there's animals, and we used to treat farm kids for parasites, and we're not doing that anymore. There's been a conscious, by the way, there's been a conscious, in my opinion, a conscious steering us away from looking at parasites for a very long time. And that's why they went crazy when we brought out ivermectin. But anyway, so I asked her that. I think, do you think if this just changed? Or could it be that when you gave them these shots, these vaccines, it did what the father of CRISPR says these do, is that they knock down they knocked down part of your genome, and that part of the genome they knocked down was your immune system that took
Yeah.
care of parasites.
Yeah.
Could that be what's going on? And these parasites now, what you
That's what it
see,
sounds like. That makes
right?
sense.
And parasite egg sacs, this is what I learned from the parasitologist. Parasite egg sacs under the microscope are virtually indistinguishable from solid tumors.
Mhm.
So the problem is, and I'll tell you, in that 29, the researcher Fibiger in 29 when he or 27 when he got the Nobel Prize, one of the things he did is when he took out the tumor of these rats, he was an anatomic pathologist. So he sliced them and looked to see what's in them, and he saw visible moving worm parasites. Okay. But the problem today is when you send a specimen over to pathology, they slice it and stain it and kill it before it really gets looked at. In most cases, they'll do a fresh specimen out of the OR, but again, when they do see motion, they rule it off as idiopathic motion of cancer cells, which is a little bit sad.
Jeez.
Well, let me tell you another one. This is another one that I'm really hot on. Because I was a spine surgeon, and at one point, for financial reasons, all the neurologists kind of left the hospital, and it was hard to find a neurologist where I was in a very busy city. So I ended up, and I trained at the Queen Square Institute of Neurology in London. So I did a lot of my own neurology, and people would send people to me that they thought had MS, or they thought had cervical stenosis or something, and it turned out I thought they had MS or something like that, and I would send them off for an MR to make the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. What did we do? We got MRIs of the brain and spinal cord. And if you have MS, what you'll see on the brain and spinal cord, which is unique to that disease pretty much, are these what they call plaques. And they're just different colored spots on the MRI in the areas of the brain and spinal cord, dark or light spots depending on the technique. But we never asked ourselves what makes the spots. We just thought it was they claimed it was demyelination from autoimmune disease. Well, finally, it turns out, and this was a long time ago, this was in the 1950s or late 40s,
Mhm.
Dr. Alan MacDonald published, or maybe he did it later, but there was a paper published in the 50s about this. But Dr. Alan MacDonald, who's a pathologist, took 10 MS patients. So these are dead. He's a pathologist. Pathologists know everything, but too late. These are dead MS patients. He not only sectioned the brain and spinal cord, he looked at the cerebral spinal fluid, the fluid that we all have bathing around our brain and spinal cord. And that's one of the things that I didn't know, but in pathology, they don't routinely, in a post-mortem, look at the CSF. If there's a pathologist out there and I'm wrong, please correct me. But that's what I was told, is that they don't normally look at the CSF. And what he's showing is when you look at the CSF of MS patients, it's obvious. They are riddled with parasites. You can literally see them almost with the naked eye in some cases. You can see nematodes. But in any case, with these special modern fluorescent stains, dyes that you can put in the CSF, it's very obvious that they're there. Then he went back and looked at the brain and spinal cord. And they had parasites in them too. But you had to be knowing what you're looking for and very carefully sectioning things. So the point I'm making is he showed 100% of MS patients in his series had MS from parasites. You know, we
100%.
this is 100%. This is the big picture, is that in medicine, and I don't fault every doctor for this, okay? I fault our leadership in the universities, but I don't fault everybody on the street that just was taught this stuff in medical school. Now, I remember, but I will just say that we have not, today, they're not questioning things. It's kind of a knee-jerk, if you have this, you do this. We need to start looking at root causes of medical problems and not just taking for granted. We name things. MS, multiple sclerosis. Ooh, that sounds like, Charcot-Marie tooth, we have all these neat names for diseases. I used to like Osler Weber Rondeau. I guess you have to have three doctors
Oh
to
my
name a
gosh, that
disease.
sounds like a food recipe.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah,
but rheumatoid arthritis. It
yeah,
sounds like we know what that's being caused by, but I think that's parasites too. And so we don't know that's not a root cause. That's just a name of a disease. And it's like you try and convince a doctor that's been brought up in this paradigm that it's not what you think. Like uh for example, wheat sensitivity, what they call gluten sensitivity, but it's really not gluten, but the problems of eating wheat in your gut. I've had four people with Crohn's disease that were literally bleeding from the bowel on medication, couldn't get it stopped. They go gluten free, it stops.
yeah.
But they couldn't convince their gastroenterologist of this because he said, no, we've scoped you. You don't have Crohn's disease because they have a paradigm. I'm going to have to shut you out there, buddy. He jumps up and claws me. Uh, they have a paradigm. They have a 10-point thing they're supposed to look for. I don't know if it's 10 points. I'm making that part up, but just they have a thing they're supposed to look for when they look into the bowel. And we've turned off our brains in medicine and we're just doing algorithms.
Mhm.
We have to turn our brains back on. We have to start being real scientists again, like they were in
Right.
the time of in the time of the 1800s when these doctors were saying no to this stuff because they were looking and
Yeah,
examining their patients.
yeah. It seems
Uh,
like it's much easier to just follow these things that come up, and then it becomes a system, and then they don't really think about what they're doing. They're just going,
right.
you know,
And
program.
I'll tell you uh, how this relates to the Republic, by the way, since we
Okay.
were going to talk about that. It relates very big to the Republic because medicine has been captured by government funding.
Hmm.
So I think these pathologists, and according to my friend, these pathologists, not the pathologists, these parasitologists, he says in parasitology circles, we talk about the similarity of cancer and parasites all the time, but he's never heard an oncologist talk about it. And the
Hmm.
point being is that even the parasitologists, they're not blaring it out on the internet saying, listen up, you guys are wrong about cancer. Why? Because they'll lose their funding. You
Yeah.
see, that is what's controlling
Always
it.
comes back to money,
It
doesn't it?
always comes back to government money. And if
Yes.
the government has an agenda, it's never to make you well.
Hmm.
It may not be overtly to kill you, although I think we are in that stage. It may just be that you're always a negative bottom line on a government-run healthcare system. In other words, their cheapest alternative is to let you die. They're always worried about their budget, and you are a drain on their budget. And you have to remember, if you want to be a, a, considered like a client, a real patient, that you're the client of the doctor, then you have to pay the doctor. You can't have the government pay the doctor because now he's the client. That
Hmm.
government bureaucrat is the patient, is the client. They're the ones that they're all the rules are written around, not for you, the real patient.
Right.
And
Right.
that's how we're not going to get out of this by voting our way out at this point.
I wonder if Hippocrates ever could imagine what what it's being
Oh, yes, he
called.
did. I think he
Really?
actually did. I remember taking the Hippocratic Oath, but I didn't understand the import. I've gone back and looked at that. The old oath, the oldest oath I can find that's translated directly from the Greek was done in about 1846. So it was before we had universal health care. The first universal health care came in 1871 under Kaiser Wilhelm, and it's been downhill ever since. And
Right.
all of them end in the same kind of euthanasia, killing people, getting
Right.
rid of the people that aren't supporting the war effort or can't farm the fields. It always ends that way. But I went back to 1846 Hippocrates Oath, and this was translated, I think, by a British guy that spoke Greek. And so what it said is that essentially, number one, when I go into the house of the patient, I will only go in for the good of the patient. Now, that seems obvious. Like I remember taking that oath when I was in medical school and graduating. I thought, well, why else would I go in and see a patient? Wouldn't it be for the, oh no, now we know it's for the Medicare reimbursement, people. It might be for his partner that wants him dead. It might be for lots of reasons. It might be for a depopulation program that you're being worked for. And that's the
Right.
other thing that Hippocrates put in the oath. It said, I will not be a poisoner and I will not be paid
I remember
by
you talking
others
about that in that
poison
episode
people.
last night with Mike Adams. So it basically what I thought you were basically saying was that um, that part of the oath was to um, encourage doctors not not to be paid to poison someone.
Right, that's exactly. If it weren't happening, why did he say that?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
when you look, when did Hippocrates he wasn't, I don't think he was a mythic person. He was a real thing. He was because Aristotle and
right.
Plato discuss him as contemporaries essentially. So he was writing the oath in around 400 BC. And there were lots of things happening in the area of Greece in 400 BC, in the area of what's now Anatolia and Phrygia. But in 300 BC, a little later, you got Alexander the Great, and they were still his famous mode of taking care of his enemies was poisoning. Poisoners were a big thing in the ancient world, and the best people to poison people are doctors, the
Mhm.
people that studied the physiology of the body, and they looked at the other thing that's interesting is that in the Hippocratic Oath, the very first precept that's in there is to I will make for my patient the best diet to the best of my ability. So
Right.
you're
It's about
that
food.
right. It tells you two things.
Yeah.
One is you can't get lazy and just not study things. You have to keep up with what we know.
Mhm.
So that was what to the very best of my ability is the idea that you just don't sit on your laurels, that you are commanded to do the right thing to you have to keep going. And that your diet is so important to the health of people. I don't even remember having a nutritional lecture in medical school. I probably
I know
did.
I've talked to many doctors that said the same thing. They never had it one class in
Yeah.
nutrition.
And my son, who had lectures, I actually happened to watch one of his because he was demonstrating years ago how he didn't have to go in certain days of the week because he could take his medical school lecture on video, and it was so much better because he could stop it and go. And he just happened at random to pick the nutritional lecture.
Yeah.
So although I'm kind of learning his point about the computerization of medical education, I'm looking at this horrendous lecture on nutrition, and I said, "Oh my God!" He said, "Mom, don't worry. I don't eat this way. I just have to pass the test." That's how
Wow.
bad it is. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And didn't Hippocrates say food is medicine and medicine is
Yes,
food?
that's right. That is why that is the first precept. The first medical precept is to give a great diet to your patients, the healthiest diet you can. And I will say, in general, this is when we get back to the Republic and we are free again to do medicine the old day. My dad was a small town country doctor. He was actually a Harvard professor who became a small town country doctor because he couldn't stand academia at one point. But he he used to do house calls. I mean, we saw patients in our house sometimes. I mean, it was that kind of thing. And in those days, they paid for medicine. There were three ways. They paid cash for outpatient
Mhm.
care, and it was very cheap. They paid, then they had catastrophic insurance for when you really got needing hospitalization, big ticket items. But that was also cheap because you didn't use it for every little nickel and dime problem. It's like your house, if you lose a shingle, think about how much your house insurance would be if every
Right.
time you lost a shingle, you called your insurance agent. No, you take care of it yourself. And that's what they used to do for outpatient medical problems. And it's still cheaper than
Oh,
if you use insurance.
I remember that. And
Right. And
I'm 75. When I grew up in the 50s,
right. So
Dr.
you remember
Rudolph
that.
would
So you and
come
I
and
are before these young
yeah,
doctors have no clue how to practice medicine outside the
right,
system. They
right,
don't know that there's a way without insurance because they say, well, it'd be so expensive. And
right.
then the last thing is charity. You can't even do charity in our system. You cannot legally do charity. It's considered, if you don't charge somebody, that's considered discrimination against Medicare patients. So it's like
Oh my God.
the only way you can actually practice patient-centered ethical medicine is by not participating in Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, all of the government health payers. You have to contract directly with the patient. And I'm going to tell you that when doctors do that and patients participate, everybody wins. Patients are happy because they're actually paying less for their care.
Mhm.
They may think they're getting a lot of benefit by going in for that yearly check and they're given trinkets by, getting little ear things, ear hearing aids and glasses and all that stuff for free. But when you're really sick, does your insurance really help you? Well, less and less. In other words, now they're really, did you get, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jones, but we can't do this because we can't get permission from your insurance company.
Right.
Or what they do is they decrease the reimbursement for a procedure that might be useful, but they don't like it because of some reason or another, and they decrease the reimbursement so nobody offers the procedure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways this works, but it's just horrible. And unfortunately, we have to, I was on the John Stossel show one time, and that's about this, well, twice, but one time was about this, about if you don't have government medicine, how do you survive? And I explained to them that even today under government medicine, if in my own hospital, this was about 5 years ago, and I wanted to get a knee MRI. I think it was a knee MRI because I'd had my knee meniscus repaired and I was having a little issue and I just wanted to check it. It was going to cost me $1,800. That was my copay, and I was Medicare. Okay,
Right.
theoretically, I'm a poor Medicare patient, so I have to, because I'm over 65 at the time, and I had to, so it was going to be $1,800 on top of that. Whereas I went down to in Omaha, they had a cash system, and I paid $450 for that test.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, this is the difference between cash and insurance and cash and government pay. So we have to get out of the system, but they don't want you out of the system. They want everybody in the system so they can control you. First, they got the doctors, and the next it's going to be you. And it's actually been us. If you're over 65, you have no choice but to take Medicare.
So this might be a good transition for
Yeah,
us to go because it's very much related to what I was talking with Ananda and Christo yesterday and Jason, the private marketing
we have to
organization.
go into the private. Yep.
And so you go into the private and shit, they were talking about this very thing that doctors to try to be true medical practitioners and follow the Hippocratic Oath are taking themselves out of the MD and they're becoming private medical. What did they say?
Well,
Healthcare,
again,
healthcare, healthcare associates or something like
yeah.
that. But not,
Now,
they wouldn't use the word doctor.
Yeah, now I'm not giving up my MD because honestly, this is what I think they don't get quite about that point. I agree with
Okay.
them on everything else, is that I earned my medical degree not from the board certification, okay, and not from the people who license you in the state.
Mhm.
That's corporate entities. Those are corporations that license you to practice your specialty. They're taking what they're doing, and this is the evil part. They're taking what you spent your whole life learning to do and your God-given talents, and they're saying you can't do them unless we tell you you can. They're taking your rights into themselves, and they're a corporation under, the medical boards are corporations under the Federation of State Medical Boards, and then they are selling it back to you. Your rights, they're selling it back to you as now you can be a doctor. Well, I reject that point. I'm going to be a doctor. I am a doctor. I'm a medical doctor. I'm proud of that education that I got. And in those days, I think I got a good education.
Mhm.
But what the problem is, if you relinquish your license now, you don't need we're getting away from needing a lot of medications. But the one problem doctors have an issue with is they can't, hospitals require a medical license from your state, and pharmacies require a medical license from your state. And so they're afraid of just not being able to be functional. Now, I'm not so worried about that because I'm not practicing orthopedics anymore. But if I were, it would be an issue if I gave up my license.
Mhm.
And that's what we have to get around. And that's where the republic, restoring the republic is critical. Because
Yes.
in the republic, we didn't have medical licensure.
Mhm.
It's like so many other things that we think are necessary, like driver's licenses, like all sorts of things. I mean, there's a lot of to talk about this, but the medical license in particular was brought about in the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s, because of what I told you earlier, I think, because the doctors were speaking out against what they wanted to bring to us was this chemical control of the humanity through
Mhm.
vaccination. I think this has been a long-term plan by people that keep the occult knowledge. I don't think this is by accident. That may sound a little weird and creepy, but it's too many things too often that go along with this to make me think it's just random. It's kind of like,
Oh
does
yeah.
anybody really
It-
think the fires in Maui and the Palisades and now, LA are random? I mean, they're not real. They're not
Mhm.
random. There's a
No.
program being
No.
run.
No, and
So,
creepy doesn't even begin to to talk
oh, I
to
know.
explain and describe what it really
So
is.
first they
Yeah.
thought they could control doctors by licensing.
Right.
And before that, we were developing, along with Germany, one of the finest medical systems of care in the world. And
Mm.
interestingly, homeopathy was a big thing in medicine in those days.
And
That was the
a lot
basis
of
of
that came
medicine.
from Germany, didn't it?
Yes, and
Uh-huh.
it did. And a friend of mine, his grandfather was the chief of the Homeopathic Society in America, I think in 1910, and he was an MD.
Mm,
You see? And
mm,
interestingly, the Rockefeller, we always blame John D. Rockefeller, but guess what? John D. Rockefeller used homeopathy for his own family. And all the Standard Oil executives used homeopathy, but they gave us oil-based, petroleum-based synthetic medicines
yeah.
based on those old homeopathic remedies.
Mm,
That's how it all started.
mm, mm,
I mean, I'll tell you another shocker, and I learned this from Dr. David Brownstein that most people probably have heard of. You know, this is where it is probably about money. So the I can just imagine them sitting back in the back rooms of Big Pharma saying, how could we get people to we're selling a lot of blood pressure medicine, but how could we sell them even more? I
mm,
know, let's put them on a low salt diet and let's encourage them to drink lots of free water, lots of clear, pure water. And I'll tell you what, so we were told, I never believed in the low salt diet. I knew this literature on that. I said, that's not true. But
mm,
what I didn't know is if you have a enough low salt diet in your life, it actually makes hypertension worse and increases your risk of cardiac death.
mm.
That I learned from Dr. Brownstein fairly interestingly. I have a Rumble video about that. So what happens is if you don't have enough salt in your diet, you can't keep your blood pressure up. That's how you keep your blood pressure up is you have the kidneys register what's happening minute to minute. And if your blood pressure starts going down, if you got to keep that sodium level at a certain level in your blood, and if it starts being off and the pressure's going down, your kidneys respond by reabsorbing sodium. Okay. But what if you don't have any absorbed sodium in your stomach to reabsorb because you're eating a low salt diet? Well, now it has to take it from your cells, which is a bad thing because then you get that's what we associate with bad metabolism later in life is when the all your fluids in the extracellular space and you get cankles, those what we call little old ladies with the ankles that droop over their shoes from
Right.
fluid. That's from that. You don't have enough sodium in your cells to keep everything in balance. So then the next step is if you're still blood pressure is dropping because you don't have enough sodium, then you have a thing called the renin-angiotensin system that kicks in. Angiotensin, meaning squeezing of the arteries. And that thing is like a big sledgehammer is an emergency backup to when you don't have enough sodium and it keeps your blood pressure up. But that's supposed to be for short-term use. Guess what? People on these low salt diets, it's happening all the time. And so they're getting high blood pressure. And then
Mhm,
what are they told? Drink more free water, which washes out more sodium.
mhm.
I'm just thinking they've got to know this. This
Right.
can't be by accident. They know the physiology. I didn't, I'm just a dumb orthopedic surgeon, so I didn't think this one through. I just didn't pay attention to them.
Mhm.
My physician son says, Mom, your labs are just perfect. You just look great. I said, you know why? He says, you must know something a lot of people don't. I said, yeah, I know not to listen to any government recommendation. But
Exactly. Yeah.
but wasn't paying attention to this one because I don't have high blood pressure, although it was creeping up a little bit, and it's back down to normal now. But when I talked to him, it was like I went, "Oh my gosh, that's so obvious." When he showed the graphs of how you're more apt to die and you're more apt to get hypertension if you don't take in enough salt. So he recommends, like 2 teaspoons of sea salt a day.
Mhm.
And that's hard at first for people to do, but it's carnivore diet and sea salt. You get you just eat the salt and
I'm a big salt guy.
yeah, well that's good. That's
Yeah.
probably
I
why
have
you're
a
doing
big
so well.
container of sea salt, and then it's on everything, and
Yeah.
especially my avocados, and
I bet you don't have hypertension. And I'm going to tell you
I
that
don't.
but when my husband and I go places and he doesn't push the salt quite maybe as much as I do, although I'm starting to. I keep a little thing on my kitchen counter and as I walk by, I just take a pinch. I noticed him doing it the other day after I told him all
Right.
this. So, but when we go places and like he goes to his medical appointment, they said, "You're not on medicines?"
Mhm.
And he said, "No." He's not, no blood pressure medicine? No. It's like no, all of our friends are on blood pressure medicine.
Yeah.
So it's true.
I know almost a lot of people I know are I take no medicines at all.
Right.
And
Right.
I wanted to ask you, So I've been following Dr. Young's advice, the pH Miracle book,
Okay.
alkaline diet. Where are you on that? Trying to be as alkaline as possible.
Well, see, I don't know that you can do it externally. It has to do with just if you eat clean
Yes,
and you're not constantly toxifying yourself and your liver is functioning, I think your body takes care of that.
it takes care of it.
So
Yeah.
I'm not going to buy expensive water machines to compensate. What I do is and this is basically, I mean, this is my 5 point program is I don't eat grains. I don't eat any wheat, kamut, barley, or spelt. I mean, it's just toxic stuff because wheat is it's stabilized with bromine, which is a really toxic halide. That's kind of like,
I do not eat wheat.
right.
Exactly. Right.
Um, I take chlorine dioxide every day, and I try and neutralize in my bath any fluorides. Chlorine dioxide is the universal antidote, but the one thing it doesn't take out is fluorine. So fluoride
Is
is a
that the
problem in our
borax
water.
products, the chlorine dioxide?
The chlorine dioxide is the two-part thing. I've got a
Okay.
whole thing on my website. People can look at the video and they can
Okay.
download the protocol. But to me, I think that's really important. It's an anti-parasitic. It turns out, because people say, well, if there are no viruses, what is disease? Disease is is having your electrons stolen. It's really that simple. It sounds other than psychologic disease. I'll say that might be separate. But a parasite and a bad bacterium and toxic agents like arsenic, poisons. In fact, virus in Latin means poison, which makes me really believe they know what they're doing. When they say
Right.
a virus spread around Wuhan and started killing people, they didn't lie, but they're speaking the old tongue. They're speaking Latin. A poison was spread around Wuhan and started killing people. So, what all those bad things do to us is they steal our electrons so that our enzymes and our proteins in our lipid membranes and things become dysfunctional. And then we start having symptoms, and that creeps up on us as we get older. But chlorine dioxide takes out the bad bacteria, takes out the parasites to some degree, takes out the toxins, and it doesn't take out the good stuff. It
So
doesn't
where do
take
you
out your
get
good
chlorine
bacteria.
dioxide?
Where do you
And what is it? What is there a particular kind of food you get it, or do
No,
you
no,
buy
you
it
have to
at
make
the
this up.
store?
This is God's gift to mankind. We didn't know about this until water purification started using it. It was developed by a chemist in 1830 somewhere. I think it may be in Germany or England. They discovered it, but it wasn't used really commercially until the early 1900s. But in the night, like Niagara Falls in 1940 converted their water purification to chlorine dioxide because they discovered it could take out they had a problem at the time with some petroleum pollutions or something in the water. It took care of that.
Mhm.
And they noticed their water just tasted so much better and was just so nice compared to the chlorine that they were using before. So these chlorine products that most water supplies use, it produces bad hydrocarbon byproducts in small amounts. As it's sitting there, when it's used in your pool for your kids going in the summer, when it gets into the sewer, it literally makes chloroform.
Mhm.
So that's a talk, but chlorine dioxide does its job, neutralizes everything, and then goes away into, salt and water and just basic constituents.
Mhm.
And it doesn't harm your good bacteria, which is key. If you take people like hydrogen peroxide, for example, and they like to swallow some every day to think they're getting their sinuses or something cleaned out. But the problem with that is it's an oxidant. It will kill everything. It doesn't just kill the bad guys. I can tell you in orthopedics, I used to have to stop people all the time from using hydrogen peroxide on wounds. It might be good one time to clean up the wound, but if you keep using
We'll
it, you're
keep
also killing
putting it
your new
on.
cells trying to heal. So you can't do that. Whereas if you had chlorine dioxide, you could use that until you're blue in the face and the things would heal. You wouldn't have a problem because it doesn't harm things that don't harm you.
So
And
how do
that's
you
really
take it?
the
How
key.
do you take it? You
And
drink it directly,
you can take it orally, you can rub it on your skin, and you mix two parts together, and it's it's a really people have used it against autism, cancer. There's almost nothing it doesn't make better. I love this stuff. So I take it all the time, and there's a protocol. You can't just start taking a big dose. You have to take it in little doses. Now, when I tell you, and this is as a physician, I still practice a little bit of homespun, over the kitchen
Mhm.
table medicine when my friends get sick. And they'll call me up and they'll say, I think I got COVID again. I said, no, you don't have COVID. What's the problem? This is like, I don't see them that much anymore because of what I'm going to tell you. So they'll call me up. This was like last summer, last year, and they'll tell me I'm sick. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to come over here and I'm going to give you, and I'm around sick people all the time and I don't get sick. I'm going to give you this stuff and I want you to put one drop a day into one drop into a glass of water every hour and drink it. And I want you to then take a bath in it. I'm going to tell you how to do that. So I give them the handout, how to do it. I send them home with this stuff. I've never had anybody be sick more than 48 hours after that,
Wow.
regardless of what they thought they had. And now we're learning, thanks to Brian Artis and the Healing for the Ages docs, about the idea. And in medicine, we knew about these things, but we didn't understand what they were using them for. The idea that nicotine receptors are what they're poisoning us with. We all have nicotine receptors all over, but especially we have these ACE2 pathways in our brain, our heart, and our lungs. And what they've done over probably a long time, this is what the old time Hippocrates era poisoners used, were snake venoms and bug venoms and things like this. And this is now what's being used against us. Probably these venoms, it's not necessarily venoms, but it's chemistry that's designed by the shape of these venoms to fit into these ACE2 pathways and these nicotinic pathways in the body. And they're making us sick. I keep getting to people all the time that are getting sick around me now. And so now I still tell them about the
Where is that
chlorine
coming from?
dioxide.
Where are they
It's
getting
just
that?
in the
What kind of
environment. The
in the
stuff that they
environment?
put out, I think, to start COVID was one of these things.
Chemtrails, possibly?
Well, possibly, although we don't know. That I can't, I can, I'm pretty sure it was in, I'm pretty sure this stuff is in the environment for multiple reasons, but at least it's left over from the COVID outbreak. But I think they're also probably putting it out some ways. It gets into these receptors and it causes you to get sick.
Right.
You want me to,
No.
I'll pause.
No, the dog just came
No,
in,
you got your
opened
dog and
my
I got my
door.
cat. Um,
He just wanted to see what I was doing.
Yeah, well, we should introduce them here. So essentially what happens is if you chew nicotine gum, which is not by itself addictive, and you can get this, like I use Lucy gum. There you go. There's a dog over there. Um,
A pit
so
bull.
Lucy gum doesn't have a lot of the toxic stuff that they put in nicotine made by the the cigarette companies. So I had a more, this is the kind of story I tell people that are sick now. The first thing to do, you can come over here, are you on chlorine dioxide and did you do the nicotine gum I told you about? And if the answer is no, no, I tell them to do both, but start with the gum. I said, you can't believe how often the gum solves it, but you still should be you still should be taking chlorine dioxide every day as a detoxification agent.
Where
I
do you
mean,
get it? Do you get it at the drugstore or?
no, you have to, the nicotine you get from lucy.co, or you can get it from if you're sick, just go to your local gas station and get it. And you can't get up on the keyboard. I'm doing something here. But the chlorine dioxide, I have a whole printout on my website,
Okay.
themedicalrebel.com. Three words,
What's your website?
themedicalrebel.com,
The
themedicalrebel.com. You should be looking right at it. It's right over my head.
got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
and you can get it. I tell you how to make it, how to buy it, and how to use it. And I have a video that shows you how to make it and use it. So
Okay.
it's really easy. And I'm telling you, the amazing thing with the gum is, besides the fact people that have long COVID and they chew the nicotine gum, it's over. Or if they put a nicotine patch, if you're a smoker, you might need a bigger dose. You can use a nicotine patch. I think though, but here's an example. A friend of mine who does the chlorine dioxide, she goes down to Costa Rica, has a house in Costa Rica. The day she gets back, she calls me early in the morning. She says, I am sick as a dog. Now she has asthma. And she's telling me that she's coughing up yellow stuff and feels really sick. I said, did you take the nicotine gum I told you when you went on the trip? Because I tell anybody, don't go on trips without taking it, because it's in our environment. That's where people are getting it when they travel a lot. So she said, no. I said, do you have it in your house? She says, yes. And so I said, yeah, I can call you in antibiotics. And an asthmatic coughing up yellow stuff, I mean, that is just like a knee-jerk bacterial pneumonia, call in antibiotics and hope we can get them through it. That's a bad thing. But if this time was the first time I didn't do this, I said, I've had so much experience now with sick people taking the gum and getting over it. I said, let's just try this. Give it a few hours, okay? take your gum, start chewing it. I do 2 milligrams 3 times a day when I travel or go to the city. And I know Brian takes it all the time. He puts a 3 milligram patch on every day. I'm kind of almost there in the winter now because I see a lot more sick people. Maybe that's the time to use it more. But she took that gum like at early, like 10 o'clock, whatever in the morning. I said, call me at 4 so I still have time to call the pharmacy if you're not well. She said, I'm basically over it. Now, to a physician, that is so shocking because I'm going to tell you, we think of bacterial pneumonia as a quick death if you don't take antibiotics. What have we really been seeing here? You know, the people, the whole germ versus terrain theory, the terrain people are winning. And I think the point is that those bacteria, that yellow pus you're coughing out, is in a reaction to something else poisoning you. And we've been poisoned for generations and think we're getting an infectious, disease through the air.
Right.
That is the big bottom line. But we have these ways out of it, and that's what we have to deal with. And so, so,
So
so
simple. The thing I
so
like
it's the
about
simple
this is
five
very
things. Or you
simple.
eat clean,
Yeah.
you don't eat grains because grains are bad for you. You eat good oils, no seed oils. So that's eating clean. Um, and no, and relatively low carb because we were meant to be fat eaters, high fat, medium protein, low carb diets. Second thing is take chlorine dioxide every day. Chew your nicotine gum as much as you need to be well. And if you have any problems, I've had people that had vision problems after COVID, and they started doing a patch or gum, and immediately it went away. And then
Wow.
when they took it off a couple weeks later, it came back. I said that means you have the toxins still in your system, so you've got to clean out your liver and flush your system. And then the other thing to consider is your parasite protocol I've got on my website about how to eliminate the majority of your parasites. We are going to live in commensal bliss with parasites in the world, but by doing certain things, you can keep them to a minimum so you don't get cancer, you don't get MS, you don't get rheumatoid arthritis, you don't get the things that we think of are not from that really
Right.
are, So, and then the other one is electromagnetic frequency mitigation.
Mhm.
The 1918 pandemic had nothing to do with a virus. There is no influenza virus. It
It was the
had to do,
radio, right?
it was the telegraph lines and it was vaccines.
Mhm.
And there's so much evidence for that. And I think still on my front page of my website, I did a year and a half study of that using old newspapers, primary uh, resources like historical societies, old medical texts and stuff like that. And I put it all together and it's on my website about what I think really happened in 1918. But it was not a virus. And the idea that they've unearthed the influenza virus from the Yukon and that's all a part of the narrative to make you afraid that they're creating these horrible organisms in the lab. Not really what they're doing. I
Mhm.
don't think that, in fact, I don't think the shot is mRNA.
Mhm.
And I know I can't prove that, but I'm going to tell you it doesn't make sense because we didn't keep the stuff super cooled. And all the mRNA that I can identify looking at the papers by people doing mRNA research for disease production, these kind of vaccines, they talk about needing to keep it super cold right up until the time you deliver it to the patient.
Mhm.
And we didn't do that.
Mhm.
The half-life is like between 3.5 minutes and 16 hours. You can't even get out of the factory if you don't keep it super cooled. And if you
And
talk
none of
to,
it was delivered super cooled, right?
right, and the other thing is I ran across Feng Zhang in MIT, the Feng Zhang lab. I say ran across on the internet. And what he said initially, I don't know if his site has changed since I started quoting this, but he said he's the father of CRISPR, this whole idea of the precise gene insertion. We can't really do that, what they're wanting us to believe. He said we can't really do that. What we can do is gene knockdown. So when they do GMO foods, they're not using CRISPR. They're not using this so-called precise gene insertion. They're using gene guns. They're using plasmids.
Yes. Yes. The
They're
guns
not using
go
what they're
through the
saying.
cell, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Plasmids is a totally different mechanism. And that's unlikely to be in there and not identifiable. So I think what they're doing is they've been poisoning us for a millennia and
Mhm.
getting us to believe that we're making each other sick because it's a great anti-human agenda.
Right.
You know, if we thought we were being poisoned, what would we do? We'd look for the poisoner.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think we are now. I think
So
we
definitely,
don't.
you definitely are against eating GMO food, I would say, right?
I'm what? Didn't hear.
GMO food.
Yeah, I try to eat no GMO foods.
Right. Me too.
And people want, I used to think that was not a big deal. I gotta admit, I didn't think that, I couldn't see how that could hurt you
Mhm.
because I didn't see how it changed me. But see, it's all about epigenetics. It's not just there, it's not necessarily that it gets into you. It doesn't have to get into you, but it's presenting you with non-foods. We were not meant to eat by God. The last thing in my, it's really a 6 point protocol is you have to be with a spiritual connection to our Creator. And once you realize that consciousness does not come from, if we split the atom enough times, we're not going to find consciousness. Consciousness is God. It's out there. It's in, that's what we are made of. And it then produces the reality that we see, not the other way around. And if we don't understand that, then we keep thinking we can just split the genome, we can split the atom, we can find all these little tiny pieces, and we can finally understand the reality of our world by looking at all the tiny little parts.
Yeah.
Just doesn't work that way.
When it's so easy that we are consciousness, and
Yeah,
when we allow
exactly.
ourselves to rest and meditate, we are connected with that source.
Every part of our body is electromagnetic. And that is the
Right.
other point. Oh, one of my fifth one I didn't put out. The other point is every day you either get sunlight or you get red light.
Mhm.
Okay, so in the winter, I used to practice in Arizona where it was easy to get sunlight. You just go outside all year. But
Right.
now where I live, it gets 20 below zero. No, I can't do that. So I have a red light panel that I use. I just got that. So I'm testing it on myself first before I officially
Right.
recommend it.
Right.
But red light's good. And red light is what helps you get rid of toxins. What we call viruses, viral disease, is really an accumulation of toxins in the body. And if you don't get out, the reason we have a flu season in the winter is we're not getting enough sunlight to
Right.
to create the electromagnetic gradient in our cells. We're like every cell in your body is like a little battery. It's got to have a negative and positive in it. This is from the work of Dr. Pollack in Washington, in the University of Washington. That's how we push toxins out of our cells. And so what we need to do is get that charge. Grandma was right when she said in the winter, you need to go down to bed earlier. You need to get rest. You're letting your batteries run down.
Right.
That's really literally true. And if you let your batteries run down, you can die of flu because you can't get the toxins out of your body. In
Right.
favor of that is in the age of wooden ships and iron men in the 1600s and 1700s when flu came around the world, it wasn't every year. We didn't have a yearly flu season until we laid down the telegram lines. And also, when these people would get sick, it would be like people with ships at sea would get sick exactly at the same time as people in Lisbon and Sydney, Australia, and yet they'd never touched land during the time that these people were getting sick. It was almost spontaneous around the world all at once. People didn't travel that fast. It was slow to get around the world. You couldn't make it around the world in 3 days, and yet that's the way flu acted. So again, and it turns out all those big influenza pandemics in the 1800s and early 1900s before telegram were corresponded to sunspot cycles. When
Mhm.
the sun's very active, it ionizes our atmosphere. And because we are electromagnetic beings, we are children of light, of
Right.
God.
Right.
And when that happens, it cuts down on our gradient because it now ionizes. If you step into a big electromagnetic field, suddenly the gradient separation in your cells goes away. You can't get rid of toxins. And you also can't, you need a gradient in order to run your we make energy in the body just like Grand Coulee Dam makes energy from a water gradient, water flying from high to low. In
Mhm.
our mitochondria, the we don't have water, we have hydrogen ions, and they have to fall from high to low. And if they're a charged particle, if you're in a sudden step into a charged field, there's no gradient. You can't make energy. If it's bad enough, you die.
That's why waterfalls are so inviting. I love waterfalls and love being around them. And I think
There's
that's
a and there's an electromagnetic explanation for that too,
right.
not just
Mhm.
an aesthetic one.
Right.
Waterfalls put out negative ions.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
see, that's what they're stealing. That's what parasites steal from you. That's what bad bacteria steals from you. That's what toxins steal from you are your electrons. And when you're around a waterfall, it replaces it. Now, the
Right.
question I have for you is there a way to do that in your house to compensate? Can you get that? Can you get that effect with something in your house that would give you those negative ions?
A good friend of mine in Fairfield, Iowa, has basically made these little waterfalls in his house where the water's
I
continually
would love to
running
do that.
through
Are these
rocks
portable
and
or he built them
stones
in?
and different little levels. And
Oh
it's,
man.
it's just, he's made his own waterfall,
See,
right?
that's what there's somebody out there listening. This is a business. You can make if you could make waterfalls that
Yes,
those of us that aren't that clever
right.
can't build. You should just do it and
I'll have Ed take a picture and send it to you.
okay.
Okay? Because
Yeah, that would
it's
be
really
awesome,
cool what
wouldn't
he
it?
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need the opportunity to be by something like that. And if you look in now we're seeing these pictures of these of the 1800s that we never had come out before. Presumably they're the 1800s. They're calling it the age of Tartaria, whatever.
Right.
That's what the big houses had big waterfalls behind them, and that's where they got their water. One of the other problems is that's not just about our cells, it's also about our water supply. It's
Mhm.
killing the energetics of the water to use a microwave that kills the water that you're putting on your plants. It kills the food quality. If you microwave your food, it's about energy transfer. And those pipes that they pump the water through that have these 90-degree right angles is damaging to the energy of water. Water is really, you know, God that you can touch, I think. I mean, that's maybe
Yeah.
blasphemy, but water has memory. So how does water have memory? This has been shown
Oh,
by
yeah. Dr.
by
Murad, what is it?
doc
Dr.
not just
Murado?
Dr. Emoto, but also
Yamato, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but also oh, I'm blanking on his name. The guy that claimed he found the virus of HIV and then backtracked.
Uh,
Um,
mhm.
he I'll think of it. There were two French scientists, Luc Montagnier and Jacques Benveniste.
Mhm.
Luc Montagnier was the guy that was the DNA for or the viral thing for HIV. But these two guys discovered that if you put a big molecule like DNA or immunoglobulin in water, and then you shake it up like the homeopaths do, that's called succussing, and then you get rid of the molecule, you dilute it out so it's not there anymore, your water still has memory of it. And you can capture that electromagnetic signature and you can project it on other water and create the effect of that molecule.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
Right.
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
you know that science, if you
right.
know the real science of life and not what we've been taught in school, you could also use that technology to poison other people. So think about our cellular phone issue now and those cell towers and those 5G towers, and they're putting them on our water towers. I specifically asked my town, what are you doing on the water tower? And they said, oh, just painting it. You're not putting cell things on there? No, we're not. And then they turned around and did it. It was not the town, it's the people that own the cell tower. So they had to rent it from somebody.
Right.
That's horrible. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And it's not because engineers don't get this. They say, well, that won't that cell signal doesn't get into the inside. No, but it resonates on the tower.
Mhm.
And it doesn't take much,
Mhm.
it's not worth the risk here. We
Right.
know it's like physicists. It's funny when you talk to scientists that are not thinking outside the box. It's amazing what they don't know about every day. Like a physicist looking at a microwave and how it produces plasma effect when two marbles are together or two grapes are together. And he said, it's surprising. I didn't, that it actually heated the grapes from the inside out. And I thought to myself, every high school home ec student knows that it heats the food from the inside out, except the PhD in physics doing this research on microwaves. Are you kidding me?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Oh my goodness. Well, we've gone almost, I have another appointment in about 10 minutes, so I want to finish these last few minutes talking about the what we haven't we were going to talk about at the beginning at the Republic. Um, and for those of you that don't understand or know about the Republic, basically our Republic ended in 1861. Jump in here if I say anything not right. But in 1861, when the South walked out, the Senate,
Yeah,
Supreme Court justices, the cabinet members, that were from the South in 1860, late 1860, walked out. And that was the beginning of the Civil War and the end of not the end of the Republic, but the Republic ceased to operate
Yeah,
at
it
that
ceased to
time.
operate because the Congress was left sine die, I think they call it,
See, yeah, yeah.
without a quorum. So to make the Congress run, they had to, Abraham Lincoln invoke the War Powers Act.
Hmm.
So by doing, and we've been under the War Powers Act, that's why presidents sign all the bills. Everything's being really done by executive order.
Yeah. And
The
it's
Congress is
essentially
the shell.
martial law.
Right. It's not, well, and that's
The
kind
way.
of, I think it's different than martial law because martial law
Well,
implies
he called it the executive government, right? His
right. So
executive
it's the
government.
Executive Powers
Yeah,
Act, meaning that you can still he could act exactly the way a republic would, but do it by executive orders, not really being done by the vote of Congress, is what I'm saying. And
right,
we think it is, and we think all this is normal. And the question people, and then in 1871, that's what gave them Washington, D.C., and we
right.
actually became a corporate, we started functioning as a corporation,
The U.S. Corp.
the U.S. incorporated. And that's really shocking. When you start, I have just done this recently. I looked up on Duns and Bradstreet, the Duns number of the United States government and the address. You can find that. You can find where it is.
Mhm.
And you can find the state of Iowa, Inc.
Yep.
on Duns and Bradstreet. I can find my county, Inc. on Duns and Bradstreet, and I can find my even some of my county supervisors are themselves corporate entities
Mhm.
under that, which is kind of curious. And my town is a corporate entity under all that. So it's all a series of corporations.
Owned by the
The Crown
corporations at the
Corporation.
top, which is pretty, from what I've seen, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, those three corporations pretty much own all the corporations, including those governmental corporations.
Yeah, they function though as if, they function under a theory. I think even bigger than them are the I mean, the Crown of England,
The Crown. Yeah.
the Vatican,
Mhm.
and Washington, D.C. as the three
The
arms
City
of
of
this.
London. The City
Right.
of
The
London.
City of London is the
Right.
financial center. The
Mhm.
thing seems to be run out of the Vatican,
Right. Right.
by
Right.
other
Right.
ways, and we are the military arm. And
Right.
I'll tell you, if people that don't want to believe this, just as a final little thing, one of the things I'm doing is I'm putting out a series of symbolism things on my Rumble, and I've got one, All Roads Lead to Phrygia. It's time to name the enemy. All roads lead to Phrygia. And part three, I go through the symbolism of the American corporation.
Mm.
How many, we have Antifa on the streets, or we did, raging, telling us we were fascists, right?
Right. Right.
But here you have the Senate of the United States, and if you look at the dais where the person stands that's speaking, on either side are these huge fascists, the fasces. That's the symbol of fascism. The symbol of Roman totalitarianism came to us. It's on the back of our Mercury dime. It's on Lincoln holds them in his hands on the Lincoln Memorial.
Mhm.
It's everywhere.
Right.
And it's in the Senate. It's on the Senate seal. The Senate seal has the Phrygian cap on the top of it and the
Mhm.
fasces in the bottom. Nobody seems to care and complain or think this is significant.
Mhm.
There are 9 states that have the symbolism of ancient Phrygia on their Iowa is one of them. Why is that there? So that's an interesting. I mean, you can go and watch this a whole series on symbolism and what I think is really happening, coming forward from the ancients to us, the occult knowledge. And I think this is where it gets even creepier than you want to know. But
I
that's a
know.
good, valid
Yeah.
question that we ought to ask. Is
So
why that's
the good news is that people are waking up.
Yeah, we are
And
waking up, and that's what we have to get out of. And I think we're close. I think we're very close. I
I
think
do
each
too. I think this movement to restore our republic is growing like crazy.
good.
Like I said at the very beginning, some of the videos that have been done by Colonel Sandy Mayarecki are on Rumble. The ones she's done with SG and on Rumble, they're very easy to find, especially this most recent one, I think it was January 2nd. She'll go through it and you can see exactly all the steps that were taken to create this corporation and the steps that we're taking now to get back to the republic, the original republic, and everywhere using the Northwest Ordinance around the country, basically a movement to have a governor in every state, 3 justices, in every state, um, a treasurer, a secretary of state in every state. So what we're doing right now, everyone who's listening, is we're creating that in every state, and we do have 50 governors now in every state,
Wow.
and we have most of the chief justices, and it's growing really, really fast. It's bottom up. We have assemblies in every county. The county is where the decisions that are affecting your life should be made, not in DC, not in the
Well,
Vatican.
our county has taken in money from our little county of 14,000 people in Iowa, but they've got Soros and Zuckerberg money came into our county. So they've been trying to take over our county and they've done a pretty good job, I think. So I need to talk to you about how stepwise we go about doing that.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
I think that's really important. That's act locally. Think globally, act locally.
Actually, it's all about bottom up government, and
Yeah.
that's what a republic really is. A
Yeah.
republic isn't supposed to be run by the central government.
Right.
We're supposed to be governing ourselves.
Right.
So, yeah, so please take a look at that, everyone, when you go in. Go to the website. There's two websites for the republic. There's members.republic for the United States of America.org. And then there's just republic, yeah, um, members.republic. Yeah, just the Republic for the United States of America.org. There's two websites and they have different purposes. And one, you can become an elector. And at the very least, if you just become an elector, because we also, under the Northwest Ordinance, we need to have 30,000 people that are part of the Republic.
Okay.
So that's what we're working on. I see it happening very, very quickly now, and the momentum is incredible. And join in, go to those websites, participate, and we need you all if you want to be
Now, I
free.
don't see a join. I'm on that Republic for the United States.org, and I don't see a join anything. There's about home, about node was the Republic
Okay,
history.
maybe I got that wrong. It may be the members dot republic for the United States of America.org. Check that one. I think there's a place
So
to
members dot Republic for the
members
United
dot
States.
republic for the United States of America.com.
Okay. 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 Oh, .com. So that's a whole different site.
Okay, yeah, that's a different site.
Okay. Okay. Because this was just
No,
Republic for the
excuse me,
United
dot
States
org.
dot org.
Dot
Yeah.
org.
Okay. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, dot
And,
org.
and this one doesn't say America. This just says Republic for the United States dot. Because this was my problem was trying to find you guys.
Okay, so let's tell everybody exactly what it is then. What do you have?
Well, so I'm gonna. So I haven't found it yet. So it's
Okay, dot
members dot Republic.
for the United States.
Oops.
I thought it was of America.org.
I'm gonna try it without that first.
Okay,
No, that says forbidden. We cannot serve that page to you. So let me
okay.
try it with America.
Of
United States uh, Republic for the United States of America
dot org.
.org. Yes, that one does it. Boy, that's a long name. Republic for the United States of America.org.
Yes,
And then register. You can register.
right,
Okay.
right. And you can contact your governor and let them know that you want to get involved. And all 50
Yeah.
states have a governor now.
I'm so excited that we have now, isn't Sandy in Iowa?
Sandy is no, she lives. I believe Sandy lives in Texas.
Okay.
Well, I know she's the governor of Texas.
Okay, so she'd have to live in Texas.
Maybe she does live in Iowa. I don't know. I don't know where she lives right now.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking that she was an Iowan, but I love it. They
I
don't
think
when
she's
you click on the let me just when you click on this register form,
yes,
goes to when you click on your state, it doesn't just say Iowa, it says Iowa Free State.
yes, yeah, yeah,
I love it.
yeah. I
Oh,
know.
that's great. That is just great.
Yeah, and for everyone out there, this has been going on now since 19 or let's see, 2009 or so. This is when it really started, and now it's really picking up steam.
Yeah,
Very much. Because everyone Trump knows all this. There's no doubt in our mind from things that he has said that he wants the republic to be the entity that survives, not this U.S. corporation.
right, right. I think the U.S. corporation's going down, and I think the reason that I say that is we are seeing more and more people speak out that never would have spoken out before.
Yeah, not only
The
that,
umbrella of
he's
control
had
falling.
Dr. Jan Helper Hayes out for the last 2 or 3 years, and she said many times that the U.S. corporation has actually been officially bankrupted.
Yeah, I think that's it. Now, I was kind of, well, I know you have to go, but one of the concerns is that these fires are being, this is how they dissolve the corporation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that's not true, but people need to be aware and take precautions here. We're not out of this yet, but I think that
Mhm.
they can't survive this, the corporate
No,
people.
no. The cabal, the bad
The
people,
cabal,
they're
whatever
not
you
going to
want to call them. But
survive.
I do, I like, somehow we have to come up with a name. Like Ananda says, nefarians, which I really like, but we need to have like corporate nefarians or something. Corporate has to be in there because and guess where corporatization came from? It came from Phrygia.
Really?
That's, I'm telling you, my history walked back 5,000 years BC. It came from Phrygia, and that's what we're suffering with it today.
I'm going to have to look that up. I had not heard that one before.
Yeah, I'm telling
Phrygia.
you, it's and that's the point.
Yeah.
Even though their symbols are in plain sight, you've never read this in any history book, you've never heard about it because
No.
they put out their front men, whether it's in science or the politics, they put out front men like Klaus Schwab to keep our attention going. We're not paying attention to the real controllers of our world.
No. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You are an amazing woman and
Well, this was
amazing,
fun.
amazing human being. Your brain is on fire
Well,
and
come tell my
goes
husband
deep.
that. He thinks I've
And
lost my
I
mind.
just, I've heard you speak before, but it's just amazing what you've done and what you
Thanks,
shared
Clyde.
today is incredible.
Yeah.
It was a real treat for all of us. And hopefully we'll get this Common Sense Summit really well publicized so everybody in America can listen to what you just said in the last 90 minutes.
Common sense is not so common these days, but thank you for
No.
what you do.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It was a joy. I'm gonna end the recording, folks. Thank you so much for being here and have a wonderful day. Okay. Stop recording. Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot. I know you got to run.
Hey,
Let's stay in
listen.
touch. I'm going to contact Sandy. I've been meaning to do that. I just got so many. I'm actually going to go on a cruise. So I have to get things organized here for February. So,
Right. Oh,
yeah.
listen. We all have so much to do, but
Yeah.
thank you so much. That was awesome. We'll have to get together again sometime. I'm going to be coming up to Iowa. I was there for a course in Fairfield in last January or February. Yeah, a year
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, and
Nice. I would
you know,
expect Fairfield to be the leaders on this. Why am I not
a lot of
surprised?
friends. I don't know. Are you familiar with Jeffrey Smith?
No.
Jeffrey Smith was the one who wrote Genetic Roulette, Seeds of Deception,
Oh,
and he created the uh, what's he call it? Anyway, it was the first organization to explain what genetically modified food does to our health.
oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Institute for Responsible Science, and I was on
Really?
his board of directors for years.
Does he have a website? Because I just had this debate with my husband. He doesn't believe me about GMO potatoes. And I said, you got to realize what this is doing. When
Well,
you're
check
exposed,
out just Jeffrey Smith, Seeds of Deception, and all of his stuff will come up.
okay, I'll do that. Now
Fairfield,
I got this.
Iowa.
Now I've got this on the members dot republic. I've got to put that
And
down.
Steve Drucker, who is the one who wrote the book about the law that he sued the FDA for their approval process of genetically modified food. Steve Drucker's his book goes through that whole lawsuit. He got all this discovery
Oh wow.
from he got the discovery from the FDA's notes on their process for approving GMO foods because that was totally wrong what they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
and it's like this appeal too.
yeah,
That's bad too. And I'm not sure that the organic means they're not GMO. They say that, but I don't think that's true.
I don't trust it either. Um,
Um,
but
I think,
anyway, check out Steve Drucker too,
yeah, I will.
Druker,
Yeah. Okay.
because he and Jeffrey Smith and I would get together every so often in Fairfield when we were together because I've been against this GMO food thing for a long, long time.
Yeah. Good for you. Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks a lot, Clyde. We'll talk again.
I also don't like those CAFOs,
The what?
the confined animal farm organizations with the pigs in Iowa.
Oh, yeah. I think I'm going to give up eating pork. I have to say, I love bacon with bacon and
Mm.
eggs. And I like my Canadian bacon when I make eggs Benedict, which is the specialty of the house. But nonetheless, I think I'm going to give it up. The story that pigs were designed in place of eating humans has some ring of verisimilitude to it. And it's the closest to us genetics.
Mhm.
If you look at a pig's hoof, it looks like a human hand. I
Mhm.
just put something up on my Telegram. I'm kind of thinking I'm not eating them anymore.
The treatment of those, the way that they treat those pigs in those CAFOs is just so inhuman. And it's the waste that comes from them,
Oh, I
the
know. And we
smell.
didn't used to we raised hogs everywhere without that problem. And everybody
Absolutely.
had a few of them. They had a
Yeah, and they were
small thing,
outside.
and they were outside, and we didn't smell them. We didn't have a problem with them, and they were
No,
cleaner.
right?
I'll tell you, if you want to see hog confinements for a different reason, look
Hmm.
at pictures in China of their Uyghur confinement buildings.
Hmm.
This is for live harvesting organs.
Hmm.
They put Christians, Falun Gong, and the Uyghurs. They round up a certain percentage every year. They put them in jail. At least they had been up until recently, I guess. They put them in these confinement facilities, and then rich people around the world that need liver transplants or whatever, they come and they get
Huh.
type and trust,
I've
and they
heard
do
about
live.
this.
Right. But if you look at the buildings as an Iowan, when I first saw that, I said, "Oh shit, those are hog confinement buildings. They just don't need the big fans
Yeah, exactly.
because they can
Exactly.
take showers."
Yeah.
Disgusting. Yeah.
By the way, until a couple of years ago when I hurt my spine, I did ragbri for like 20 years.
Oh yeah, I used to do it all the time.
Yeah, I love it. And I do it
I
with my
loved
grandson.
Ragbri, but I just well, COVID killed it, number one, and number two is my friends that I used to ride with, died or got older and couldn't really. You.
Yeah, here we are. We're going to keep
Yeah,
going, okay?
yeah, we're gonna keep going. I got a cat chasing something in the wiring behind my computer. It's like, oh,
Okay, well, if I do ragbri next summer, which I'm hoping to, I'll call you and we can do some riding together.
well, I haven't been riding. I've been working out in the gym, and I have not been riding for years, so I'm probably not gonna jump into it. But yeah, but if you go through Logan, come see me.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. All right, great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Nice.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.